Have you ever wondered how chemistry and football corresponds with each other?
Well, both chemistry and football deals with collision. Football deals with collision of people, while chemistry deals with collision of atoms and particles. In chemistry, this is called collision theory. But have you wondered what collision theory is?
Collision theory deals with particles hitting each other with the right orientation and having enough energy to create a chemical reaction. And football deals with football players knocking each other down with the right energy.
There are 5 factors that can affect rate of chemical reaction in collision theory, and those factors are volume, concentration, surface area, temperature, and the catalyst. The first factor we're going to talk about that affects the rate of collision is going to be volume. If you reduce the volume, there's going to be higher amounts of collision. But why is that? Well, by you decreasing the volume, you're making particles have less space to move around, and they have a tendency of bumping into each other when they have less space. So when they bump into each other, they start causing more collision. That's why the rate of collision goes up when you decrease the volume. The next factor that affects the rate of reaction is concentration. By you increasing the concentration, you increase the collision rate. Because if you increase the concentration, if you're going to have more particles in the area, and with more particles, they start to bump into each other more with the right orientation and energy, and that increases the collision, and the rate of collision goes up. The third factor that affects the rate of collision is temperature. The higher the temperature, the more kinetic energy the particles get. And the more kinetic energy the particle gets, they move around more. And when they start moving around, they start once again bumping into each other. Once they start bumping into each other, they start colliding, and the rate of collision starts to go up. Temperature equals energy, so that's why they start moving around. The fourth factor that affects the rate of chemical reaction is surface area. If the surface area of a reactant increases, there's going to be a greater chance of particles colliding because more particles are exposed, and it's going to be easier for them to hit each other. The last factor that affects the rate of chemical reaction is the catalyst. All the catalyst does is lower the energy required to have a chemical reaction. I know some of you might be lost and wondering, how is this in football similar? Well, actually, they're very similar, and me and my group mates are going to show you how similar they are.
Go.
When watching that demonstration, we can all come to 2 conclusions. The student was tackled, and she went backwards. This would be considered a good tackle in football because you got your opponent to go backwards and you had the right form. This would also be considered a successful collision in chemistry because the 2 students had the right geometry and they hit the other student with enough energy to make her go backwards. This demonstration showed how geometry and energy relates to tackling and collision theory in football.
Go. Go.
This demonstration shows how surface area has an effect on the collisions of particles. In the first video, the collision was not successful because the defense couldn't get the tackle because everybody was all clumped up and they had a very small surface area. But in the second video, the collision was successful because the surface area was increased, so it made it easier for the defense to tackle the offense because the surface area was increased. If you could decrease the size of a football field to the size of a hallway, it would be much easier for players to get tackled because the size is smaller and everybody in a smaller space. It's the same thing for collision theory. By you decreasing the volume, you make it easier for things to collide. This will be an example of how particles move with limited space. In football, by adding more players on the field than the other team, you have an advantage because you have a higher concentration of people on the field, and it's going to be easier for you to tackle or to hit your opponent. It's the same thing as in collision theory. By making the concentration higher, you increase the collision rate. By shortening the length of each quarter in football, the players are going to have to run faster each play. This is very similar to how temperature works in collision theory, but the higher the temperature is, the faster the particle moves and more often they collide and hit each other. A catalyst in football would be the coach. He is the one who has the ability to call the plays and make the game easier on the players, and he is the one bringing all the players together.
Bloopers.
Move in a circle. Yeah. Go.
Collision theory deals with Collision theory deals with particles hitting each other that.
Have you ever wondered how football and chemistry corresponds? And pause that real quick.